Oh, hello everyone. It's Baduk, and today I'm bringing you round two of the U.S. Open. I played against Daiichi Takahashi, I believe, and I played black in this game. Now, as I said before, I was really happy with the Go Congress and playing in the tournament, and I feel like by the time I reached the last three or so games, I started playing more like how I enjoy playing. And in my first three games, I wasn't uh, exactly used to it yet. So that's my excuse going into this game. But my opponent actually just played really well. He ended up getting a second place overall in the Open tournament, losing only to one person, and I believe that's the person that got first place. So that's not really that bad. But going into this, it went from bumped it, my bad. But yeah, going into this, it went from a player that ended up being fairly easy to beat to a player that was extremely difficult to beat. Yeah, granted, I did make a really bad, and from my point of view now, it's a pretty obvious mistake, but he didn't give me any opportunities to come back into the game, even though technically I could have had some chances if he ever did mess up, even a small mistake. So we can look at how this game developed. This is the only game that I'm not very happy with. The other games, I've made some mistakes, but this is the one I was the most unhappy with, I could say. So here I was black, and I started upper right corner. I don't know if he did actually play this corner next. It doesn't really matter too much because I would likely still want to do this one because my goal here is to enclose on the third move. I really enjoy enclosing versus approaching if I can help it. And if I had played over here, it's likely that I would have wanted to do an approach of some sort instead. Because if I just enclose with his stone facing this direction, it's easy for him to get an enclosure, sort of already reducing my potential here. Whereas if we go to the actual game, uh, I at least have some potential to develop on the bottom and some Joseki I can play in the bottom left corner to potentially build. And if he decides to go ahead and reduce now, you can say that it's a bit of a small move because it's not really enclosing his corner. But if he encloses his corner now in the same way, I get to be the first one to play the middle point between two enclosures, which is often a good idea. It's not really too important. I just want to discuss a little bit about my idea behind how I like to play this opening. Though I did learn a few things. First of all, he played the 3-3 right away, and I do like this direction of blocking here. Because he has a stone here at d3, blocking this direction gives me it's hard to sort of describe, but it sort of breaks up the board. It doesn't give me anything specific. It sort of breaks up the board a little bit. And as I've mentioned, like I mentioned this quite often, I like to break up the board whenever possible. I like it more as white, but I think it simplifies the game quite a bit when there's smaller pockets of territory. Makes it easier to count, makes it easier to figure things out. If since I approach the bottom left here, if my opponent, like in the game, plays this F17 move to sort of reduce or even go a little bit further here in order to try to attack, the nice part about blocking on the Q17 side is that we can now Hane and attach here. And this leaves open a few Joseki. I'm going to play the simplest. I guess we can call it the simplest one. White capturing. I think that's the simplest here. But you'll get to see the basic idea of what is going on. Is that I'm switching the corner, or not the corner. I'm switching sort of this top side for the right side. And so now, if I ever wish to, I'm more likely to have a potential territory on this side of the board. Whereas if you just block the normal way, what I would consider to be the normal way, or the old-fashioned way, blocking towards your own stones, you can see that these stones are a bit further away. Making them further away means you sort of owe another move here to sort of get any sort of territory. And if we compare that to, let's see if I can go down here. We can compare that to this sort of variation where we have these stones a little bit closer. We have a little bit more of a solid position as well. It means that we don't really need to play a move over here right away, and we can focus on potentially building instead. Because even if white does come in on this side, we just prevent white from getting a base, and my group's already alive. There's nothing that I really have to ever worry about. So it's actually kind of interesting, kind of useful that you can sort of build more efficiently or more effectively with this type of variation. I guess I'm going into a little bit more detail on this sort of stuff because I ended up losing the game. Because there are some things I learned here, and I did learn that I don't like this high approach, specifically this high approach when it is this board position. I already said that I liked that this is sort of breaking the board up into smaller pieces. And no matter what, I'm not going to be playing this Avalanche Joseki. If he knows anything more than I do, and he Hane's here, I don't want to give anybody some extra benefit that they don't really need to have. So after playing this, I would most definitely just approach low instead. Even if we get a very basic continuation here, and it's the same as in the game, it feels very different for me. For example, I don't feel the urge as much to come over here. I do feel the wanting to come down to the bottom here, which is potentially a really good follow-up on the bottom, even if they play the Knight's move instead of just the Kosumi. And then I also feel the need to want to play this, which is something I should have done in the actual game. There are other Joseki here, but the one that I basically showed you is one of the more common ones, I think. So I end up playing high, and this just gives white... Oh, not that. I said I wouldn't play that. There you go. This Hane here and connect just gives white a really nice territorial position. It sort of feels like my stones aren't working that well together. Now, of course, this is the opening. It's not that big of a deal. You can sort of play whatever you want as long as you aren't making any obvious big errors, reading errors, that sort of thing. But like here, it's actually kind of difficult to find the right move, right? I don't really want to play on the bottom now. I can still technically expand from my enclosure, but I don't really have a really easy way to do that, because this stone at f3 sort of gets in the way. And what I played in the game was this move, which is okay. It's hard to really build anything on this board the way that it's put together. And with this here, maybe I would have wanted to block the other direction to have more of the influence versus being able to switch. Now, in the game, he just played this R13 little Kosumi here, and this is where I sort of realized I made a little bit of a mistake, because now it's a little bit awkward for me as black. And so instead of playing on the left side, I should just Hane and do this directly. If we do just play that simple Joseki here, and we get something like this. Normally I do this one, and I think there's no ladder. If he just responds again on the top, this is probably okay for white. This should be okay for black. Now I can come over here, and it's a little bit more natural. But I've switched the potential for my territory to the other side, give myself a little bit of strength, and then come back to the big move on the left. And there's still sort of invasions in this top little area. It just feels like a little bit more of a a little bit easier to find the next move. When I say like manageable, I don't know if I say that often. I think it in my head when I say the word manageable, but when I think that, or when I say that, I really mean easier to find the next move. Whereas after white gets this Kosumi, it becomes a little bit more difficult, because white is extremely solid on the board, and there's nothing I can really do about it. So I really like the way white played. So I do this attach, Tiger's Mouth, and double Hane. This is a common sequence to help reinforce this group so that you can Tanuki. Because if he gets one more move on the top here, or even if he jumps over the top, it becomes a much weaker group. So I like making this exchange. I don't know if it's necessary right now, but I like making this exchange. And you're supposed to just leave it as is, because if white cuts, you can Atari from the outside. When white captures, you connect. Now you're threatening the corner and threatening to make strength on the outside. If white protects the corner, there's a double Atari, and you can connect or tiger's mouth, whatever shape you feel is better in the situation. And if white thinks the strength in the center is too big, then white can hane here. And you get the points in the corner. So it's just a trade. I think both should be okay for black. But in this case, I end up expanding to H17, which AI thought was a little bit far. Normally, I like the idea of going all the way. You don't do a halfway move, you do an all the way move, or you're making a base. Those are the two types of moves you're making, right? So if I was going to make a base here, maybe I would play a little bit further away. But if I want to sort of try to add any sort of pressure at the corner, then I want to play all the way here. And that was my goal. This stone is not really connected to my stones on the top right now. It's connected to trying to pressure the corner. So he kicks, I extend, and he does this right away. And I had the right idea here, just a bad follow-up. And this is where the game actually starts to go downhill. Because before this, there's just like minor grievances I have again with the directions I played in the game. Because with almost, I can't say almost, I think every other game that I played, I was ahead in the opening. Whereas this game, it was like 60% for white in the opening, which is not really a big deal. It's like 2 or 3 points or something like that. For me, because I really liked the opening, it just felt a little bit bad. So it's a more of a personal disappointment rather than an actual one, honestly. So here, there's sort of only two different ways that you can play. That'd be extending down or attaching over the top. If you were attached over the top right now, it becomes a little bit easy for white to get a move like this in Sente, which protects the corner. If white's able to protect the corner, let's just play this way. Then white can attack the stone on the top and make this sort of an awkward position for me. And so you don't really want to allow that to happen. Because I have a little bit of potential influence here, some potential strength, I want to be able to use it as best I can. And so one of the best ways to do that is to fight back. And the normal move to fight back here is to extend down. But there was a game I watched before going to the US Go Congress, and it suggests, well, not it, AI, when I was reviewing the game with AI, we were checking some stuff, it suggested to play the diagonal move. So I decided I would try that out. It's not really too different. I'm potentially going to lose a couple points in like maybe, I was going to, okay, I guess end game or invasions into the corner, I'm going to lose a little bit. But this one's just a stronger move here because my idea was to pressure the corner. That's why I played the top move. This idea is continuing to pressure the corner. So if he keeps jumping out over here and ruining the potential I have on this side, then I'm going to be able to be fairly severe in the corner. He's going to have to run away. If he's running away, we'll play very, very simple moves. You can see that I'm going to potentially get the top side and maybe I'll be able to reinforce the left side, right? So it's a sort of an awkward situation for white to be in. So white has to be a little bit more careful in how they play on the left side. If, for example, white might even want to just defend the corner right away or try to defend in Sente, something like this. This just gets white out towards the center a little bit faster, but it exchanges it gives me the possibility, not really exchanges, it gives me the possibility of making the points on the top, which would be okay for me. This one is a little bit less severe. It's harder to connect back to my stones in Sente. But he actually just drops down into the corner right away. And this feels like a really slow move, but this is actually a very powerful move, which made me instantly regret everything. I tried to use an old technique here to connect my stones a little bit in the center, which is this attachment here. If he Hane's here, I can push or I can cut. If he captures, I'm able to Atari. And maybe I can get this Atari. But at the very minimum, I can protect in the center. And you see that my stones are much more connected. So it'll be a little bit more difficult. I have a much more powerful situation. There's more than this that can happen, but that's usually why white will back off. Then you can attach here. And then you need one more move to sort of settle the shape here. And this technique's not necessarily bad, but AI did think that this was just wrong. Even now, though, I need to just jump over here on this side or jump over here. But I end up playing a really bad shape move, which is this extension. This is bad shape because white can play this move here, which are the vital point. If I jump out to try to attack this stone, white has an easy drop down, threatening to connect up underneath. I have to drop down. White can just make a 2-space extension here, and we're already seeing that white is getting a base. If I try to prevent white from getting more of a base, because there's another slide here, threaten to connect up, white's able to jump out towards the center in whatever way they want, and it's much easier to manage this group. So I'm sort of forced to crawl from underneath, but that means that white is able to make a very light position here and reduce any potential that I have. So yeah, it's a very awkward stone. Very awkward positioning or shape. And then I also still have weakness here with this elephant's eye. That's why it would have been better to just jump out here. Reinforces my left side. And if white does decide to try to do something here, it's a little bit difficult. Because there is this sort of shape to seal off the top in some way with a better shape than before. A little bit of Aji, but just depends on how the game goes if I want to play that way. Because I played this one, white just goes over to the left side. And I believe AI already thinks it's 70% or 80% for white. It's really terrible, but I don't think it's really that bad for a human game. If he makes any mistake in the fighting on this left side, there's a possibility of me just having this extremely nice influence in the center, which is why I like to control the center as best I can in almost every game I play. Any mistake gives me the opportunity to create a large amount of points. My opponent has to be more careful than I do most of the time. It's one of the main benefits of center control style. Now, I just attach over the top. This is sort of a common idea. Usually there's a Hane, Atari, connect up underneath. This sort of basic idea here. Don't know the best way to play, but we'll just turn. So I get a lot of influence, and this is probably an okay position for me. But this was just sort of a probe from my opponent. And so now that he knew that I wanted the influence, he decided to try to take it away from me, or try to, if I go for it even more, try to get more profit from the situation. Because connecting underneath here doesn't really benefit the bottom left corner. It's just big end game. So if he can get something that's slightly bigger instead, that would be nice. So he drops down here, threatening to connect up underneath. And this is where I make the actual, probably game-losing move. I can claim game-losing for sure. Even though it seems like it's probably still early enough that I could win, this is definitely the sort of game-losing mistake here. I end up connecting here to try to fight back, which doesn't seem that bad. But the proper way to play, and I know this is the proper way, is just to attach over the top here. If we just let white connect up underneath, let's just do this one. There we go, white connected, and I made solid shape. I have this really, really nice influence, and with this tiger's mouth, I can now just block it really well. I can even potentially jump in a different way, depending on which side's more important to block it off. Build up this middle in a really nice, strong way. I still have this really ugly Aji here, but I have this really nice potential in the center. As I said, with the really nice potential, your opponent has to be more careful than you. When you have such strong center control, your opponent needs to be more careful. If they play too deep, if they play too aggressively, you have the advantage in most of the fighting, and it's up to them to prove that they can do what they wanted to do. So any singular mistake, the game could end up in a really great favor for me, which is extremely likely at 5 or 6 dan. I don't know if I said that. My opponent was 6 dan. Yeah, Daichi is 6 dan AGA. But because I end up playing this move, what I thought was that maybe this would be a little bit more of a fight. But I miscalculated something, and it's actually quite obvious. I think I even saw it when I was reading the board, but it just didn't register as something that actually worked for some reason. So he just jumps. I thought, okay, this will work for me. If I can fight, this will be good. The next thing that he can do, if I try to protect on the left side, so he can do this Hane and push. And you can see that this is actually a couple points, or not just a couple points. This is almost alive already, actually. It also has this cut here. If I have to give this cut up, then I have more cuts over here, right? This is really awkward. So I don't know if I even can block that way. I might have to block like this. And then if white just plays this one move here, white's basically alive already. So I thought this is no good. I'd have to fight back in maybe an even more complicated way. I'm not really prepared for that idea. So the proper move for me was to make sure that it didn't happen. But I have to be very careful with my group of 4 stones over here on the left. It's actually a little bit worrisome. So white attaches here to get strong. That makes sense. I don't really want white to Hane or to do anything here. That would make them too strong. So I decided to Hane. And now the game's over. Because white can play here and these 4 stones are dead. But basically, like, unlike the last game where my opponent was too aggressive, I ended up being the too aggressive one. And I played inconsistent in this game. If you want to look at this and try to read it all out, it really is dead. Yeah, so in this game, I'm the one who ended up playing sort of inconsistently. After this happened, I sort of worried a little bit about my next few games. Like, what if my first opponent was like a 3 dan? They just came in at the wrong rank of 2 dan or 3 dan, right? And the rest of the players going to be as sharp and strong as Daichi was. And I'm like, oh crap, I'm going to have a really, really hard time. I didn't think many of my opponents would be weak, but I didn't want them to be so much stronger than me that I couldn't prove that I was also sort of like AGA 5 dan or 6 dan or something, right? So I was a little bit worried about that. But I just sat for a little bit here, and I thought about the only possible way for me to win the game. I've mentioned this multiple times already, and I want to bring it up again. Center control is very important. Because I have some influence and some potential center, I have at least one more opportunity to try to come back into the game, even after this left side is dead. I can use this left side as a sacrifice to gain more influence. So I believe I jumped out here. If he pushes this way, then I can do this empty triangle, which seems like it would work for me to at least do something here. This would be quite painful, but quite painful, but manageable. It's possible to win this game because I have some influence. It's totally possible. So he cuts the other way. Atari and push. This push is actually quite nice because he cannot block with the tiger's mouth, which would make it almost impossible for me to get anything else in the center. But because I can just peep here, if he connects, I can push through. If he blocks, I cut. I have 3 liberties. He has 3 liberties. This is also like a ladder situation. And so there's a lot of Aji here. So this is too much to worry about. A little bit not solid enough. And allowing him to capture a couple stones and Gote potentially would be okay with me. So he has to connect instead. That's actually really, really good for me, meaning that I can potentially make some extra strength here. This is maybe a little bit slow, but I want to play a very solid move. We find out later that it's not very good. I should have left that for now. But it's hard for me to find the right type of move here. Even if I come back and play on this side, it feels annoying over here. So I want to play here. This makes sense to me. I could potentially just connect solidly. If they cut, I can just give this up, right? Just give this up. It's not a big deal. I don't need to worry about it. This top side's basically solid now. Good. It's going to be still a longer game now. This top side is definitely going to be able to match the left, maybe even some of the other points that he has. Then I have a little bit of something on the left side and a corner. It's a much, much closer game, though we should still be winning by at least Comey. So something like this should be fine to do. But this just felt like the right type of move. We'll see in a little bit that it's definitely wrong. So he cuts over here. As I mentioned before, you can do the counter Atari here. I should have been a little bit more consistent again. I was very inconsistent in this game. Because when he captures here, I should not actually go after the corner, which is what I did. I thought about it for a lot, actually. It was hard for me to choose which one was actually bigger, but I should at least stay consistent. He can take the corner, I'll take the outside. And now, if he tries to invade or do something, I have to try really hard to fight him and potentially kill him. If that works, then it should be an easy game. If it doesn't work, uh-oh. I think he could probably just go straight to end game, but I think this is the right idea for me. Instead, I go for the corner, which he thinks is a little bit too small, so he takes the outside instead. And yes, now he's the one with the center control. Now I'm the one who has not much to do in this game. So I take the corner, and I believe he peeps right away. As you can see, this bad shape from earlier is going to haunt me. And this is why I should have connected instead. It would have fixed my shape, made it actually more appropriate. Because here I have to connect, and then he can still drop down, and I have to extend down. And again, he already has this sort of center power towards the center, towards the middle over here, sort of getting rid of any of the potential I had on the top side. And my left side group is now a potential weak group that I have to worry about. So he's able to sort of make a simple base here on the top. And yeah, the game is just no good. No good at all for me. I try to fight back a little bit. AI actually did like what I was doing here. I have to come back so he can't connect. I have to make sure I take this as points. And I thought he needed at least one more move here, which the AI did agree with. Something over here, even the jump. Very, very thick move to make sure that there's no possibility of coming under attack. But he ends up playing the Hane on the left side. And so I almost instantly Hane'd here. And this was the correct move. So I do have a small chance now. And that's what it came down to. I have a very small chance. It's still difficult. But when he extends here and I jump in, the group is actually not alive. I can't just surround because then he just drops down and he's alive. So I have to jump in. I have to turn it into some sort of fight in order to come back into the game. You might think that he can just live with something like this. but it's actually kind of difficult because of the Atari here. This at least turns into a Ko if he wants to make eyes on this side. And if he connects, I connect here, but it's just not quite alive after I get to come on this side. And of course, if he comes over the top here, this move gets rid of the eye on this side as well. And the Atari becomes a potential connect underneath. So he pushes through. And then I think he jumped right away. I have to cap. Sadly, moves like this. Oops, there we go. Sadly, moves like this do not work because he just has this sort of clamping move, which is extremely annoying. I'll have to read that out. But at the very minimum, say he doesn't try to do anything complicated, you can at least continue to push out from this side because there's too many Ataris. This Hane is threatening a double Atari. And now my group on the left is surrounded at the very minimum. So I have to attack from the actual center. He could have defended like this, which would have probably been the end of the attack. There's maybe a little bit of Aji because there's pushes. But in general, I think this is probably not going to be good enough. But with that Aji available, maybe I'll be able to make something. So he decides to attach here, which is actually a much better move because I can't really cut like this. This just doesn't quite work for me, if I remember right. Just not quite enough liberties here. And I couldn't do, I keep clicking the wrong thing. There we go. I couldn't do the Hane here and try to do something like this because it's just surrounding my left side group. There's nothing I can do there. And there's still Aji to capture the stones. So I have to Hane the outside. He can pull back. A very strong way to play. He's basically connected. He's basically alive. There's still a little tiny amount of Aji that I can use for like co-threats and stuff later. So I can try to do something. So I cut right away. Oh, and this was another sort of reading mistake. My opponent was definitely much better at seeing far ahead. I thought I read it correctly in that if he pushes through here, you can capture my 2 stones, but I get a thicker position on this side and potential towards the center, cutting off this 1 stone here. But actually, when I Hane here, he Hanes, or he doesn't have to Hane. He cuts, Atari, and then this Hane. And now my group on the top's dead. It's like, oh, well, that's really obvious. And I can't let him capture any of those stones in the process, even if I need to save my group. Because if he captures a stone, the game's over. But if he captures the top, the game's also over. So it was a little bit awkward there. So he has a little bit of potential weakness on this group. So I do Atari and connect to make sure that maybe there's something that I can use. But he just defends his group right away in a really, really thick way. This defense prevents any sort of Aji in the corner. There was at least something in the corner before. Let's say he captures here. There's some sort of 3/3 Aji here that could maybe help me on one or the other side. It's unlikely to really do anything, but there's at least the Aji here because there's the Atari and capture, right? And it's the same on the other side here, Atari and basically capture. Probably capture this group of stones even, potentially. So there is some sort of basic Aji, even with just the Atari and cut right away. So I think he played the proper solid response here. If he doesn't play anything, it's a very close capture race, starting with this move. But it doesn't quite work now. So I had to think again, just like earlier, where I had to turn the top into some sort of thickness in order to keep playing. I counted that I think White had around 70 or 80 points with Comey. And I had like, if I got the points on the left side, that's like 5 to 10 points. I might be able to do a little bit of a squeeze. So we can say 10 points on the left side. The upper right is like 15 points. So like what, 25 points, right? I'm likely to get a couple points in the center. So we're not going to count that, but we got to keep that in mind. And then my bottom right corner is at least 10 points, if not more in the future. So at 15, 10, and 10, so that's 35 points compared to 80 points. But this is why humans are a little bit delusional compared to AI. But I have this influence here, and the bottom side's pretty open, and this side's pretty open. It's almost impossible for me to get the move at like R9 or R8 and a move on the bottom. But if I start with the bottom side, which is what I did after I thought about it very long, if I start with this side and I'm able to turn any of this into points on the top or turn this bottom into points, it's at least another 20 points on the bottom, no matter what, at least 10 points here. And now we're at like 60, 65 points, maybe 70 points maximum. So we're only going to be about 10 points behind. Of course, if white just plays this, the game's potentially over. But if I'm able to turn this into a very large area instead, there's still the possibility of getting enough points to win the game. So this was my last ditch effort, but my opponent just said no. This Hane is too painful. Actually, very, very painful. I can't just extend. This is too much. And he can still, like, so he gains like 10 points here. You can just play this move here, which gains another 10 or more points. And now, even if I get everything in the center, it's no good. Because he gained like 20 more points. And 20 more points is a bit too much. I could deal with him getting just the one side, as long as I got something else on the other side. So it's wishful thinking, but it's the last opportunity for me to try. So I do try. Hanes, so I have to try to do another sacrifice play with this sort of counter Atari, but he can just extend, and the first person to get Tengen wins, right? Is that I believe that's the rule? Because now my group is just no good. I thought he had to capture. Oops, not that one. I thought he had to capture because I could push through, and these stones weren't dead. But he can just Atari and turn. And I have to keep coming out. These two stones are not really important. Yes, I do gain a couple points here. But now, after he plays this, he's gained that 10 plus points on this side, reduced me even more than if I just backed off, and can still build even more points on the right side of the board. Also, much, much easier to get rid of anything on the bottom. So it was definitely too much. Definitely unhappy with how this game went. And if I played a little bit differently and I understood the opening a little bit differently, it would have been a completely different, much more equal game, I think. Because even with the moves that I would consider small mistakes in the opening, I think I had a decent chance as long as I played properly on the left side of the board and didn't make this empty triangle. But I was very happy when he went almost undefeated until like the second to last day. He ended up losing one game to the person who got first place, who I think went undefeated. I have to double check that. And so he ended up getting second place. I believe he was also like first place for the Perigo. And I think that meant he was going to represent the AGA for the big World Perigo tournament thing. I wasn't paying too much attention to that sort of stuff, but I know he won first place with Perigo stuff. I don't know who his partner was though. So he's a very good player, very strong player. I would not mind playing him again. At least I think he was the one that won first place. Maybe it was the other guy I played. I can't remember anymore. I have to go look. I have to go look at that part. That's a separate issue. I don't remember. It was still very fun. It did make me worry about my next couple games, but we'll see in the next game that I didn't really have that much to worry about, and I had a very good chance because in my next game I played the guy who got third place, and I had quite a nice position going into the game. So I was very happy with that one. And we'll have to see how that one panned out. Hope you guys enjoyed this. I want to thank you to all of my people who are supporting me on Patreon and all of my YouTube members. I want to start doing more stuff with YouTube members. So definitely keep an eye out for that in the next month or so, we'll see if we can get some more stuff going on there. Anyway, I guess I hope you guys enjoy this, and I hope you guys are having a good day. Have fun.